Hi, I'm G.
And I'm Melanie, and we're talking about Derek Walcott and his background.
How does his background affect the poem? The experience of growing up on an isolated volcanic island in ex-British colony has had a strong influence on Walcott's life and work. Walcott expresses his feelings of personal isolation, caught between his European cultural orientation and black folks' cultures of his native Caribbean.
Midsummer explores his own situation as a black writer in America who has become increasingly estranged from his Caribbean homeland. Both his grandmothers were said to have been descendants of slaves, which may have strongly impacted the way that he views human rights and other similar topics.
In the poem, it quotes, "But blacks can't do Shakespeare." It shows how Derek Walcott is black and he still made a poem that impacted many people, and how it showed that diversity can bring a lot and can teach us many things. It can be interpreted as something that he has heard before, which makes it more impactful as it can be something from his personal life.
When he follows up with the sentence, "This was true," he's referencing a time period where this was a true statement, but it's no longer applicable in today's age. He himself is proof that this statement is not true, as he has won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature and he has written plays before.
In Midsummer by Derek Walcott, he displays a number of images throughout the poem. In the 6th line to the 7th line, he talks about the leaf stems tug at their chains, the branches bending like bored cattle. Branches resemble the wiring of the bars that kept the house up during the riots or during the fire. And he refers to the branches bending like bored cattle, which the Boer people of Dutch descent colonized by South Africa, where racial segregation was later practiced. In lines 19, 20, and 21, he writes, "Calibans howled down the barred streets of an empire that began with Catamon's raceless stew, and is ending in the alleys of Brixton, burning like Turner's ships." Calibans, which were deformed creatures in Shakespeare's play The Tempest, they were enslaved by the enchanter Prospero. Caliban has been interpreted as a native who rebels against his island's colonizer. So the Calibans were like people that would rebel and go against like enslavement or racism, which is what I'm getting from the poem and seeing as like in one of the lines he talks about, "But the blacks can't do Shakespeare, they have no experience." This ties into what he's talking about throughout the poem. And how they howled down the streets and barred of an empire that began with the Catamon's raceless stew. The Raceless Stew was poetry written by the earliest known English poet, Catamon. And in the alleys of Brixton, burning like Turner's ships. Turner's ships can refer to oil paintings, other subjects, and ships burning in battle.
Diction is shown several times throughout this piece. Derek Walcott alludes to The Tempest. This allusion is a form of diction to show perspective to the audience. He uses a parallel method to show the Brixton riots compared to the Shakespeare sonnets. Another form of diction is brought out during the portrayal of conflict between the societal classes. Walcott also uses imagery and symbolism to support his diction.
Derek Walcott's tone is straight to the point. He shows and displays the differences between the conflicts between the riots and the social classes. He also describes that everyone should be in with unity instead of conflicting with each other. That's how he is portraying his tone.
So for the question and answer, the first question is, how does the autumn imagery contribute to the poem? In many other pieces of literature, people see autumn as a time for change and things happening, because all of the leaves that were once green start to turn different colors, the trees start to lose their leaves. So the way that I interpreted this was that he specifically chose autumn as a way to show that things are changing, but maybe not in the sense that it's a good thing, because he says that they seethe towards autumn's fire, And fire is also seen as something being like really intense and uncontrollable at times. Next question that I have is, why does the author choose to mention Warwickshire instead of a different county? In the poem, it's actually used because that is the birthplace of Shakespeare, but the way I interpreted it as was earlier in the poem he starts to mention like child fairy tales of an attic England, fairy rings, thatched cottages, fenced with dog roses. And then he says, a green gale lifting the hair of Warwickshire. And I feel like he's using that because people tend to romanticize England without really realizing like all the things that happened surrounding it. So he chose this one especially because Shakespeare's so well known and people like just kind of would also romanticize things like his sonnets and his plays. So it like ties together.
So there's a lot of problems highlighted in this poem, and the ones that stand out most to me specifically are based on classism and racism, specifically within the Brixton riots and the stereotypes that are surrounding Black people. So the solution is that there has to be a reformation within like the police system or department to stop the fear that runs through these people that provokes like such violent actions like seen in the Brixton riots, where these group of teenagers like started to harass the police officer because they thought that he was harming someone. So if this stigma is no longer there, / is no longer true later on in the future, then people will feel less inclined to act with this violence. And similarly, people in general, or just like specifically targeted towards police in this case for the Brixton riots, need to understand and be like introduced to these cultures in order for them to see that these people are just ordinary human beings and they're not a threat in any way, shape, or form, because this entire thing started because they were giving unwarranted arrests to just average Black people doing like everyday things. So they need to, on both sides, stop like this idea that they have going on in each other, and so that will fix the problem